I'm very pleased to be here, and I thank the organizer for their invitation to participate in the celebration on the 150th anniversary of the Politecnico. I have had contact with the Politecnico of Milano ever since I started in research. In the early 70s, I visited here with the late Professor Giovanni Prose, with whom I shared interest in the Navier-Stokes equation. Then things have developed substantially in the last 10 years, relation with Paris and the US, and Vittorio sent 2 students to me in Indiana. So I'm very glad to have so many connections, and I am very glad to see the influence of the Department of Mathematics here in many places. I wish to Politecnico many years, many success in coming years. I'm looking for my, where did I leave it? So before I start on this the transparencies, there is 2 remarks. Someone just a few minutes ago asked me whether there should be an S at ICES. I am not sure, probably not, but I put it. It's my responsibility. There should be an S at Ocean, that's for sure. And what is interesting is that in the first version of the program, someone added an S to systems. And then I asked that it be removed, because the whole idea is that, as you will see later in the lecture, is that the 3 components are, interact together as a single system. So it's only one system. There will be little mathematics actually in my talk, and a lot of physics. And the physics I learned from discussion with Robert Detré from the French Academy of Science, and my long-time collaborator Joseph Tribia, who is a senior scientist at the National Center of Atmospheric Research at the NCAR at Boulder, Colorado. I will start with a little history, brief history. In the literature of weather and climate, generally Pierre Simon is quoted as the first one who have suggested that the climate can be studied by studying the motion of particle constituting the atmosphere. So maybe it's a little stretched as an interpretation of quotation. What I found in the literature is in the second edition of the book of Laplace, Laplace, what we all know, there is a short paragraph, so that's a book on probability, and there is a short paragraph which I'm going to read with you. The translation in English is from me, and I have also highlighted the words which will connect with the subsequent part of the talk. So we must see the present state of the universe as the result of its previous state and the cause of its future state. The superior intelligence which at a given time would know all the forces in action and the respective position of all its components, if furthermore it is broad enough to submit all this data to analysis, could include in the same formula the motion of the largest bodies in the universe and that of the lightest atom. Nothing would be uncertain to it, to superior intelligence, and the future as well as the past would be in its field of vision. So that's a nice, very view, but probably he did not believe fully in that as a reachable goal, because that's his book is a book on probability. So he knows that certainly he made that we are not going to reach that goal. So let us analyze the 2 points that I have highlighted. The first one is the understanding of all the forces in action. That was the understanding of physics at that time. It was all forces, and so if we take the word in a broader sense, we would think at the physics of the phenomena. We will talk a lot about it. And in particular, certainly, he did not have one of the basic concepts because thermodynamics did not yet exist in 1840. Thermodynamics developed about 50 years later with at the industrial age with the appearance of the steam machine. So after, at the beginning of the 20th century, there was already not a complete understanding of the physical phenomena. You will see in my lecture that there are so many important things which are still not well understood or not understood at all, but still there was a body of knowledge sufficient to start hoping, and this was the program which were said by William Berknes and Lewis Fry Richardson. In particular, Richardson has a book that he wrote in 1922 about that, which has been reproduced and available in the Dover collection until a few years ago. And he believed, he thought it was reachable, and he believed in it, and he thought that many people doing numerical computation could resolve these equations. So the book contained the collection of physics that was known at that time, and he was hoping, and he was serious about it because the Richardson is the Richardson that we know from some elementary formula in numerical analysis. There is the extrapolation formula of Richardson and something like that. So, but with reference to the quotation of Laplace, we still did not have, we had reasonably enough knowledge of physics, but still the superior intelligence was not available. That would be, of course, the computer in our understanding of his idea. And so this appears in the 1960s with the first computer. John von Neumann, as you know, created the first computer at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton. And once it was very well constructed, he wondered what application he could make use, because it was already too much computing power. It was not obvious what to do with it. And the two applications that he chose was classical fluid mechanics. He has some computation, interesting computation in fluid mechanics, and that was essentially the basis of what developed as a computational fluid mechanics. Nowadays, it's a whole area of engineering and science. And then the second application he started to develop is the application to the atmosphere science. And essentially with his collaborator, Jules Charnay, he set the basis of the modern school of atmospheric science, writing the equation and solving them on the computer. But I have an additional comment to make about climate, about writing the equation and solving them. I will come back to that later on. So let us see what are the problems. First, the question of the scales. John von Neumann had a very good perception of the things already, and he says in one short paper that he published in 1960. He said that there will be three classes of prediction which are important for geophysical flows. The first one is weather prediction. What we call weather prediction now is predicting temperature, rain for a period of a few days in a limited area, which could be still a few thousand kilometers in all direction. Then there is the flow, the prediction, for which the flow has forgotten the initial condition. So this refers to what we call now attractors and things like that. So that's for a period of 10 years, starting from 10 years and going to 100 years or millenniums. And of course, for this type of scale of time, we cannot have a too precise prediction, like in weather prediction, and we want only to predict tendency for glaciation, warming, content of CO2. And in that case, in the previous case, the equations are for limited domain, and in this case, usually the equations are for the whole Earth. And then he had also the intuition of something which was not studied in his time, the phenomenon corresponding to intermediate situation and intermediate period of times. And this includes, for example, the annual monsoon or El Nino. As I said, the phenomena which was not studied in his time, but he realized that was an important point. To perceive the difficulties, let us see what are the scales which are involved. The smallest scale in time goes to 10 minus 18 a second to 10 seconds in time, but I'm not sure how this time came. It was suggested to me by one of the physicists. And in space, but I know too well, the spaces goes down, the spatial spaces go down to the micrometer, which is the size of the particle drop of water in any cloud. And it's important. We will see that it's important. So that's the scale, the smallest scales. The approach that are used, there are two types of approach that are used commonly. The statistical approach and the approach based on the physical principle. So the statistical approach consists in accumulating, it consists in comparing the current observations to accumulated data. And the advantage it varies, they imply less calculation than the method based on physical principle, but the drawback is one can only, of course, since it's statistics, one can only predict situation which has already occurred in the past. One cannot predict situation which has not occurred in the past, and there is less calculation, as I said, but still there is it is necessary to accumulate data. The more data we have, the more comparison point we have for the statistics. The approach based on the physical principle, which is now the most common with the increase of computing power, consists in writing all the equations, solving them with computers, and seeing what happens. So the drawback is that it leads to very heavy numerical simulation, and also some phenomena are still not well known. So writing the physics is something, but we cannot really write it. For example, that's a list of things which are not well known. I will come back to that. The solar and infrared, the ultraviolet radiation coming from the sun, and the infrared radiation coming from the earth, the variation of the local content of the atmosphere, the aerosol, the clouds, the effect of vegetation. Well, there is a long list of phenomena which are not well understood and which comes into the picture. And the advantage, of course, is that we can predict, unlike with the statistical method, we can predict phenomena which did not occur in the past, like predicting the effect of volcanic eruption or evolution of temperature, and also making prediction backward in relation with paleoclimatology. So I will not speak too much about the statistical method, but rather about the thing which I am closer to is the approach based on the physical principle. So that's the understanding of interaction laws, as Laplace said. There are three types of phenomena which occur. The first type of phenomena are those which for which the equations are well known and they result from the fundamental laws, like conservation of energy, conservation of mass for the chemical species, conservation of angular momentum, and they express the invariance of physical law with respect to translation and rotation. The second category of phenomena include phenomena which are well understood for in some simple situation, but which become very complicated when there are many of them. For example, the equation of chemistry of the atmosphere. We use just simply the equation of chemical kinetics. But on the other hand, when we want to study the content of chemical product in the atmosphere, we have 50 to 100 products, and so it's very complicated to manage all of them. And the third category is about phenomena which are not well understood. For example, what is the how the evaporation depends on the speed of winds, how the aerosols are created by biomass, and questions like that. Also mentioned is the relation with life, which is just starting to be dealt with. To see what are the aspects of the problem. It's first we start with the computational, mathematical, and physical point of view. We start with the computational point of view. We enter in the area of the general circulation model, either of the atmosphere, of the ocean, of the coupled atmosphere-ocean, and also the ice. Also, we should add. And so GCM, AGCM, or GCM. There exist about 20 GCM in the world, which have been built by different organizations. And a GCM represents typically 100 man-years of work. Typically, it's 10 persons working on the model, writing the codes for 10 years. There is typically 100,000 lines for each component of the climate. And since there are about 700, 800 of them, so this is 700,000 lines of for a program in total. So then this is implies a lot of modesty for the mathematician. Don't expect as a mathematician to come and to say, I have a very clever idea to do such a thing. I will tell you, okay, we have 700,000 lines of codes program. We cannot throw them away like that, and you can only hope in the long range to influence them in future code. So it's not like a smaller scale problem where you have instantaneous interaction with a physicist. So the finest mesh grids currently in use are of the order of 25 kilometers, which represent quite a lot of points on the air, but still leaves many phenomena not well described. I think that it could very well rain in one place at a given moment and not rain have no rain 25 kilometers away. So one has to find statistical methods, statistical averaging of such things. So from a mathematical point of view, many things. When I started to work on the subject with Jacques Lyons and Xu-Hong Wang, we used to say the equation of weather is Navier-Stokes plus Coriolis. But then with time, talking to physicists, I learned that it was very complex. So from a mathematical point of view, we have the equation that govern the different phenomena. In general, it's partial differential equation. A few phenomena are governed, which takes into account memory, are governed by integral differential equation. There are the boundary condition, the boundary and initial data for the boundary and initial value problem, but there is also the problem of constant input of new data, which we have to take into account. And for that, we get into the domain of data assimilation, how to, it's not solving an initial value problem. We know the temperature at time t, and we continue. We have to keep receiving new data, and we keep putting them in the program. And then the numerical method. All that are the different pictures involved in the study of the climate problem. For the physical aspects, so it's as the power of computer improves, we are considering more and more phenomena which need to be modeled. So besides the equation for which the phenomena are well understood, there are the phenomena for which new modeling is done. And there are phenomena for which the models are not available, and we use what is called parameterization, which is not parametrization. It's a contraction of parameter and representation. How to, there are some coefficients in the equation, how to evaluate them by taking into account some data or some statistics of similar problem. Okay, that's the physics. Well, I hope you are interested. It's a general description rather than a mathematical description. I will say a few words about mathematics later on. So the phenomena which govern the climate, now the list of phenomena which govern the climate. First, there is the radiative phenomena. This is probably the most important. How the cloud, how the ultraviolet emission of from the sun, of waves from the sun is handled, and how are what happened to the infrared waves emitted by the Earth. So that's an essential point. And when we speak about that, there is of course the problem of how the you will see a picture in a moment how the clouds react. It's one of the essential points, one of the main causes of uncertainty at this time, how the clouds behave, how they, what are the radiative properties of the clouds. Then there is the chemical phenomena, of course, which can be either anthropogenic or natural. They affect the physico-chemistry of the atmosphere, and thus they affect the radiative properties of the clouds in particular, as we all know. And then the third phenomenon which governs the climate is the dynamics of the air, of the water for the ocean, and their interaction. So in short, the air, drives the ocean. The ocean regulates the temperature in the atmosphere. Then there are the exchange with the air, the exchange with the ice, and also the important phenomenon is the role of the ice at the poles in commanding the big vortices which occur in the oceans, from the top of the ocean to the bottom of the ocean, and from the one end to the other, and which has a cycle of 4,000 to 5,000 years. And that's one of the components of the climate. So this is a presentation of a model. very high above and not reachable at all are the equation for the dynamics, the equation of Navier-Stokes, which are unthinkable for any foreseeable future. Then there are what are called the non-hydrostatic models, which are not used commonly, but which are used sometime in some situation where there are inversion of, for example, heavier clouds above lighter one, heavier above light air. So it can be used locally. And then we get into the hydrostatics model coupling with couple the ocean and the atmosphere governed by their respective equation. And then the chemistry. So these are what I said, the 6 or 7 components of the climate, the chemistry, the sea ice, the vegetation, the clouds, the orography, the topography. And that's all the components of general circulation model. That's a complete model, and from there we can derive various models of lower dimension. So that's the hierarchy of model. The general circulation model is 4 variables, 3 in space dimension and the time. And then there are several models with average and to put us in space dimension 2, 1, or 0, which model can be studied by themselves or can be studied to produce some coefficient for the big model. So the simplest model is the zero-dimensional model. Apparently people take it seriously. It's a little hard for me to take it seriously, but just they said they write a balance in between the what I said, the energy coming into the Earth and the energy lost from the Earth. And so for the temperature, I write an equation as simple as that for the evolution of the temperature of the energy. And S is the solar energy absorbed by the Earth, F is the infrared energy re-emitted by the Earth. And so that's a simple equation of evolution. And S equals F at equilibrium. So that's an interesting picture. You see the summary of all what I said. So there are the ultraviolet waves coming from the sun. The number is the percentage which comes. So 45% goes directly into the air. 5% is directly reflected by the air. 25% is absorbed by the clouds. 25% is directly reflected without entering the cloud, and so on. And then there is the analog for the radiation from the surface going to the cloud, and so on. So as I said, the model of in smaller dimension are obtained by averaging in 1, 2, or 3 direction. But then there are problems at that time which occur, which are similar to the problem of turbulence in classical fluid mechanics, how to average the equation, how to average the nonlinear terms. There is more physics than we would like here, but let us see. So there's our model. So I will explain this. So that what is at the center of the general circulation model. There is what is called the hydrostatic model. So there is the velocity of the air or the ocean is decomposed into a horizontal component and vertical component because they play a different role. The horizontal direction is much bigger than the vertical direction. And So there is this, the equation of conservation of horizontal momentum. That's the usual term for those who are familiar with fluid is V3, grad 3 of horizontal velocity, but it's just that it is written with different notation. This is for the atmosphere. P is the vertical component for the atmosphere, using the fact that it's a basis of hydrostatic assumption is that Z is a decreasing function of P. So this is the usual term of Navier-Stokes. This is Coriolis force, and this is the pressure. So that's this equation is the hydrostatic equation, which replaces, expressed in the variable P, which replaces the conservation of vertical momentum, which is simplified by the hydrostatic model. The conservation of vertical momentum, we neglect the vertical velocity and all the terms, which, and so there remain this equation. Then there is the continuity equation, which even for the atmosphere, when it's expressed into the vertical variable P, it becomes like the divergence of velocity, 3D velocity is 0. This omega is not the vertical velocity, it's the vertical velocity in the P variable, the equation of state. Then the height, which is a function of the other variable, Z. The heat equation, or the energy equation, and the conservation of water vapor in the air. And here there are many things to say about that. And in particular, we see appearing the term in red, which are processes which need to be modeled because we don't know them really as parameterized. So dH and dQ are just the dissipation coefficients. That's a usual term. And there is some modeling for the turbulence by introducing the Smagorinsky form of turbulence and using different viscosity in the vertical and horizontal direction in relation with turbulence, as I said. But it's considered as well understood. People use a model of turbulence, and that's it. Then there are these terms in red, Q1, the radiative heating for the atmosphere, how what is the amount of heat obtained from the radiation, and the CON, which is the heat obtained from condensation processes, the air condensing into water or into rain, or the rain evaporating. So there are heat release or gain in this case. And then in the Q and the rate of evaporation and the condensation, again due to the cloud, which are not well known and need to be modelized. So if we assume that this quantity in reds are known, then are some auxiliary physics. Then we have, this is where we started many years ago, with Jacques-Louis Lyons and Shu-Hong Wang. We have a system which involves prognostic variables, horizontal velocity V, temperature T, Q, and S, and what are called the diagnostic variables, P, pressure, density, and vertical velocity. They are called diagnostic variables because they can be explicitly computed in terms of a prognostic variable. Look at this equation on Q. I will come to it later on. So if we stay with this equation, then we have a system, and what was our initial work with, as I said, to write it as an equation, which looks very much like the Navier-Stokes equation for the set U, which is V and T, and Q for the air, or S, the content of salinity for the ocean. So it's an initial value problem, which with a nonlinear term R of U, which looks very much like the Navier-Stokes term. We have long ago obtained existence of weak solution with Lyons and Wang. And then there has been about 10 years, 15 years of development on primitive equation. where there were some similarities between the primitive equation and the Navier-Stokes equation in terms of existence and uniqueness of solution. And then the situation bifurcated, and with the results which were proved first by Kaotiti and Kobalkov independently, and Kukavica and Zian, who proved the existence and uniqueness of strong solution for the 3D primitive equation, so that behavior is not the same as in the case of Navier-Stokes. So there is no clear price for this problem to come. Now, current works is on the non-viscous case, and so I should say two words. The non-viscous case that for the Navier-Stokes equation are similar to the primitive equation. In the non-viscous case, one would think that the non-viscous case is similar to the Euler equation, but this is not true. So we know since a paper very long ago that the inviscid primitive equation do not behave like the inviscid Euler equation, in particular by the fact that the boundary condition cannot be